You don't love me like you love the others. And so in the hustle and bustle of everything, we oftentimes forget to make room for God. To make room for God. What I've discovered is that when we make room for God, it can open up some awesomeness when we make room for God. First, by opening up, making room for God, we experience salvation. That's really what it is. We experience salvation. We get to live in eternity with God. What a wonderful opportunity it is when we make room for God. We get salvation. Secondly, things like comfort, peace, belonging, value, all the things that we desperately desire are answered in Christ. We receive those things when we make room for God. So this morning, I pray that you will make the decision to make room for Jesus, to make room for God. The first point that I want to make out, present to you this morning is this. The Messiah's entrance into the world is not what was expected, just like the video said. It wasn't what was expected. For approximately 4,000 years, the Old Testament records for us the promise of a coming Messiah, a Savior. All those who had their eyes set on this. The whole entire Old Testament was written in anticipation of the coming Messiah. All the prophets spoke about it. All the patriarchs spoke about it. The awesomeness of the Messiah coming. The anticipation of this monumental day was very prevalent at the time of Jesus' birth. Malachi, the last book written, from that time until the time of Jesus' birth, silence, 400 years. Yet the anticipation of the coming Messiah was prevalent still at this time. They were wanting the Messiah to come. And all the signs were there to say Messiah is coming. They were in oppression. They were being ruled. All the things that the Bible said they were kind of living, so they anticipated. Much like today. Matter of fact, we can read the headlines and read our Bibles and go, whoa, Messiah is coming back. And so just like we have this anticipation, and I have it more than ever. Like I said, when I look at what's happening in the world with Israel and Russia and all this Turkey, and I'm going, whoa, this is what the Bible said. I learned this stuff 30 years ago. And it's happening. And so this anticipation of the Messiah coming. Well, they had this anticipation back then as well. Messiah is coming. Matter of fact, you can go over to Israel today, and you will see signs. Because they don't believe in Jesus as the Messiah. So they have signs. Messiah is coming. Still to this day, there's an anticipation that the Messiah is coming. And now, he has arrived. He has arrived. We find that the Messiah is born and is laid in a borrowed stone feeding trough. For the text tells us that there was no room for them at the inn. This is not what was expected. This was not what was expected of the Messiah. When I owned my business and I lived in Arizona, I would call Lionel, the guy who was running my business. I would say, Lionel, I'm coming to town. Make sure all my equipment's clean. Make sure the office is clean. Make sure the shop is clean. Make sure this is all done. I want it to look good when I get there. And Lionel, you pick me up at the airport. I'll be there at this time. And don't make any plans with your wife all week because your world revolves around me because King Robert is in town. You roll out the red carpet for me because I was in town. And so this was kind of the thing, what I would expect the Messiah to show up in the same way. And yet here he is in a cold stone trough. Not what the people expected, not even what I would expect, even after reading it. It still kind of makes me scratch my head. Again, I usually announce my coming and tell them what to do, tell them what I expect, and usually it gets done. But here is Jesus, the King of Kings. Think about that. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, as a baby. Now, what's amazing about this is you got to keep in mind, here's baby Jesus in his humanity. God in the flesh, completely dependent on Joseph and Mary. Think about that. Completely dependent. Talk about humility. His whole livelihood, his whole life existence depended on humanity, which he came to save because they were sinners. Think about that. Wow, not what I would expect the King of Kings and Lord of Lords to come. You know what I'm saying? I mean, man. But here he is. You would figure that he would have a pretty elaborate plan in place for his coming. He's the king, right? I mean, look at when we watch TV and the award shows, whether it's the Grammys or the Country Music Awards. Everybody gets dressed up in their best. They got the red carpet. It's amazing what happened, right? Because all the people, the upper class are coming, the upper echelon, and they roll out the red carpet because all the important people are going to be there. And yet here's Jesus, the most prominent person ever. And he's born in a nasty, stinky farm in a stone trough. Not what I would expect from a Savior. Not the grand entrance that I would expect. You think of dignitaries when they go to different countries. You know, you think of our president when he goes to another country. What do? They greet him with all the fanfare, the bands, and the red carpet, and everything. That's what I would expect. I'm coming. Come on. Make it look great for me. And yet that's not what happened. Now, if I was the Messiah, thank goodness I'm not, there are some people out there who claim to be messiahs. But I'm not claiming that. I would have chosen a much different entrance into the world. I would have chosen a much different. But Jesus came in a way that no one expected. That no one expected. I would have chosen a castle or a palace to be born in. I would have had all the heavenly hosts there singing, hallelujah, King Robert is in town. That would have been my plan. And yet it wasn't the plan of Christ. He passed by mansions, thrones, and dominions and went down into a manger. Think about this. The manger was borrowed. It was borrowed. It was not even his or Mary's or Joseph's. It was borrowed. As a matter of fact, almost everything that Christ had or used was borrowed. The donkey he rode on, even his grave was borrowed. This is the King of Kings. It's all his, and yet he borrowed somebody else's. Think about that. Not what I would expect from a Messiah. What kind of reception did Jesus receive? There were no hallelujahs from the people. In fact, there was not even room for him in Bethlehem. We have no room for you, Jesus. There was no room for him in Jerusalem. And this was unexpected. When the wise men told Herod, he is the king of the Jews, for we have seen his star in the east, Herod was troubled, as well as all Jerusalem. So here they find out, well, okay, hey, the Messiah is here. Not quite what I expected, but they, again, because they anticipated it, Herod says, that's a challenge to me. So what did he say? He made a decree that all the children would die. 2 years and younger boys. Not the kind of entrance that I would expect in a Messiah. You think Herod's going to dictate the life and death of Jesus? Yet Herod thought he could. Think about that. If this guy is the Messiah, I'm going to have him killed. Good luck with that. Good luck with that one, you know. That didn't work out too well either. Anyway. The baby was a threat to the Herod king, so he wanted to get rid of him. Let me ask you something. Has the world grown much better today? Is not the world today like the town of Bethlehem? We don't have any room for him? We don't have any room for Christ? Is there no room for Jesus? What nation wants Christ today? What nation wants Jesus? Think about that. America welcomed him for some time, but now the efforts to get rid of him appears to be stronger than ever, just like it was in the Bible. Let's get rid of Jesus. We have no room for him in this country, just like they had no room for him in Bethlehem. They had no room for him in Jerusalem. America, as I said, welcomed him. Let's say we put this up for a vote. We'll call it Prop 777. Prop 777. Does America want to vote for Christ? I believe that the vote would be in a negative. I believe that the vote would be negative. And they show this every day. Just read the news. Just read the news. We've kicked Christ out of school. We practically kicked Christ out of church. I mean, we don't want Christ in America anymore. We're doing everything we can to get rid of him. I would, again, take it a bit further. How about if the church voted today? Would they vote to make room for Jesus? Sometimes I wonder. Would they even elect Christ? Would there be room for him? Or would a great many church members not want him? What if Christ went to Washington? Oh, do you think they would make room for him there? I don't know. They probably accuse him of being too politically incorrect. They probably accuse him of being a bigot full of hate. We don't want him. It's the same exact thing that happened to Jesus. Nobody wanted him. Nobody wanted him. There is no room for Christ. But what a glorious day it would be if there was room for him. There's a story from Matthew chapter 8. A couple of men were demon-possessed, and Jesus delivered them from the demons. And he cast the demons into the swine per their request, and the swine ran down the hill, and they jumped into the Sea of Galilee, and they all perished. What an amazing event it was. Well, what was the response to such an amazing event that they delivered this demon-possessed person who was out of control? They couldn't contain. What was the response? Well, it tells us. And behold, the whole city came out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they begged him to depart from their region. They didn't want him. They didn't want him. Wow. They had no room for Christ, even though he did this amazing miracle in their life. Why do most people not want Christ or have no room for him? Because they would have to change. And listen, people don't like to change. And so it says there in John 3:19, it says, and this is the condemnation, that the light, Jesus, has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. You see, that's one of the reasons why people don't want to make room for Christ. Because they like the way they live. They don't want to change. They like the darkness. And that word love is agape, which means they're totally sold over to a life apart from Christ, to a life of darkness. They had no room for Christ. People loved their sin, and if Christ were around, they would not like to deal with that. And so that's why people don't want to make room for Christ. It's because it's a challenge to their very lifestyle, the way they want to live, and what they think is good, and what they think is great, how they think the world should run and operate in their world and in their mind. So Jesus comes in, and there was no room for him. There was no room for him after he performed these miracles. No room. However, the second point I want to make is the Messiah's desires for you to invite him into your life. He wants you to personally invite him into his life. So then where is Christ wanted? Who wants him? Who is willing to make room for him? Have you ever thought that question about yourself? Am I wanted? Have you ever asked yourself that? Am I wanted? Am I really appreciated? Do people really want me around? Am I wanted? I have felt that before, that I'm not wanted. I have felt at times that no one wanted me. They could care less if I was around or not. Especially growing up, I did not feel wanted by my parents, by families who took me in and then asked me to leave. I've shared my story with you, growing up in foster homes, and, one of the most hurtful things that was ever said to me is when my mother, I got in an argument with my stepfather at the time, and they're both deceased, and she stepped in between us, and she said, I lost my first husband because of you, and I'm not going to lose him. And that rejection of feeling not wanted, like you wanted this other person more than your own son. And how difficult that was, and how painful that was, and how scarring that was for a lot of my life. When my father left, I've shared he beat me the day before he left. Felt so not wanted. Was it something I did? Does he not want me? When I was asked to leave the different foster homes, they did not want me no more. Families that took me in and told me I had to leave. It is a gut-wrenching feeling. I remember when I pretty much lost everything, and not one friend reached out to me and asked me how I was doing. Felt so unwanted. I felt so unwanted. I remember on a few occasions being marginalized at a couple of churches. They had no room for me. The feeling of rejection that we can all go through. When people feel that there is no room for them, that no one wants them, when they feel that they are a burden even to their friends, it can drive them to do unimaginable things. I think of that Southwest commercial, Want to Get Away? Any of you ever feel like that when you feel like you're not wanted? I just want to get away. I want to go away. And I sometimes wonder if this is how Jesus felt. The King of Kings and Lord of Lords coming to bring salvation to everyone. And he was rejected and not wanted. When I would do something stupid and I was shunned, that feeling of rejection and loneliness was almost unbearable. I did not feel peace. I did not feel comfort, like I belonged and valued. It seems to me, again, as I mentioned, that I believe maybe Jesus felt these feelings as well. His neighbors did not want him. The Nazarenes did not want him. Most of his family did not want him. Jerusalem did not want him. Bethlehem did not want him. There was no room. In John chapter 7 is an interesting chapter that shows all that shunned him. And it ends in John 7:53 with this. And everyone went to his own house. They had no room for Jesus. Oh, this is going to get better, don't worry. This is going to be a positive Christmas message. But what I wanted you to do is I wanted you to get a sense of feeling like maybe how Jesus felt. And he came for one purpose, to save us, to love on us. And he was rejected. This is not what I would expect the Messiah to come as. Completely opposite. And yet he still did. There he was, all alone. Picture yourself, how would you be? I can imagine that he cried out to the Father and received comfort from the Father. But was it always that bad? Was it always that bad? Was Christ always left alone and rejected and no room? They had no room for him in Bethlehem, no room in Jerusalem. No one wanted him around. But though there was a house in Bethany, and it says that Martha received Jesus into her home. It says there. And now it happened as they went that he entered a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Did that invitation end up producing something great? One of the greatest blessings and miracles documented for us? Did that simple invitation to invite Jesus into her home produce something wonderful and amazing? Well, it did. A short time later, Lazarus came home sick. A fever had come over Lazarus. And one of the leading physicians of Jerusalem was sent for, and after a few days, the doctor tells Martha and Mary that their brother is going to die. Lazarus is going to die. All earthly hope had failed, and they all had given up. Then the sisters, Martha and Mary, sent for Jesus, and the messenger simply said to Jesus, "Him who you love is sick." And that's all it took. It was enough. Jesus simply replied, "I'll be there. I'll be there." Now, it took him a couple days to get there. But can you imagine Martha and Mary, how their hearts must have felt when the messenger told them that Jesus would be there, and Jesus even told them, it's going to be okay. And what happened in those 4 days that Jesus took to get there? Lazarus died. Man. Wow. What kind of friend is that? You know? Difficult. He was already dead. Can you imagine that feeling going through their heads, their thoughts? What is up with that? We invited him in. We took care of him. This is how you treat someone whom you say you love? A few days go by and Jesus finally shows up, and Martha runs out. If you would have just been here, Lazarus wouldn't have died. Paraphrase, yo, he will live again. I like the paraphrase. That sounds much better, yo. He will live again. Wow. Of course, Martha says, of course he'll live again in the resurrection. He goes, oh, no, I got something way better than that, man. Just you wait and see. Paraphrase. Then Jesus calls for Mary. Mary, the master is come and he calls for thee. And just like Christ is still calling today. Calls for Mary. And Jesus Christ is calling for you. He's inviting you to make room for him. And so Mary comes down. And she comes down to Christ and says the same thing. If you would have been here, my brother would not have been dead. It has been 4 days. And there everyone is weeping. And in one of the most dramatic scenes of the Bible, there is God in the flesh. In the shortest verse of the Bible, John 11:35, Jesus wept. What was he weeping about? Was he weeping over Lazarus? No, he knew what he was going to do. He was weeping because at that time there was a sense of rejection. There was a sense of rejection against Jesus. Where's there any faith? He was weeping because no one had faith. It was a sort of a sign of rejection. They believed, they sent for Jesus. They knew he could do it, but he didn't. So what's going on here? Then they went to the grave, and Jesus tells them to roll away the stone. The reaction was expected. What? Paraphrase. Been there 4 days, man. That dude reeks. Paraphrase. But they obeyed, and then Jesus prayed. And then he told Lazarus to come out. And behold, there is Lazarus alive. Now, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If I was Lazarus, I would not be coming out happy. He just spent 4 days in heaven. And Jesus, I'm sure, went up to him in heaven and said, bro, I got